March 1st, 2025. Thousands of cheerleaders, parents, and their coaches packed into the Kay Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center for one of the biggest events in all-star cheer, NCAA Nationals. But what was supposed to be a weekend of trophies, team bonds, and once-in-a-lifetime memories turned into chaos. Mid-competition, the building erupted into screams. Athletes dropped their bags, parents sprinted towards exits, rumors of an active shooter spread like wildfire across cheer Twitter. But by the time the dust settled, officials said that it was just poles falling. No shots fired, no threat detected, just a misunderstanding. But if that were true, why did so many people run for their lives? Why did athletes hide under tables, and why were multiple performances interrupted mid-routine? This wasn't just a miscommunication. This was a traumatic event, and the silence that followed might be the most frightening part. Today, we're breaking down what really happened at NCAA 2025 and why so many in the cheer world are calling it a cover-up. Before starting this video, I want to put a trigger warning. If you're sensitive to mentions of gun violence, please feel free to click off this video. I asked people on Twitter to help me out in creating the most accurate reporting for this video, so a lot of what I am about to say is based on first-hand accounts from people who attended NCAA. So, what happened? For those of you who don't know, NCAA stands for the National Cheerleaders Association, and it is the most popular cheer competition of the entire year. It is also one of the most prestigious competitions in cheer. NCAA is a 2-day competition with the competing team scores calculated as follows. 25% of your score is your day 1 score, and 75% of your score is your day 2 score. On the 1st of March 2025, cheerleaders began getting ready for competition. Some were already on mat, performing in front of packed crowds and screaming fans. Others were still backstage, doing hair, touching up makeup, warming up stunts, or simply trying to calm their nerves. Everything felt like a normal NCAA weekend, until suddenly, it didn't. Sometime around 1 p.m., chaos broke out. People began screaming. Rumors of a gunman inside the building spread like wildfire. Within seconds, the competition floor turned into a scene of mass panic. Cheerleaders in full uniform sprinted through the halls. Coaches yelled for their athletes, and parents were separated from their children.
Authority. It's the shooting. Oh my God.
Just get down. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Just get down. Get in there. You're okay.
One young athlete said that he was walking out of one of the competition halls when he heard a stampede of people screaming, yelling, and running. He called his mom, who was on the other line, as he got to a hotel, where more panic ensued as people were running to the hotel, screaming and yelling about there being an active shooter. Another account from a spectator recalled how he was separated from his boyfriend at the time of the incident and hid in a bathroom stall, where he heard loud bangs and called his mom to say goodbye. The door was barricaded by a custodian who had promised to keep him safe, and then when they determined that it was safer, he ran for the exit. Another person heard people yelling, "He has a gun," followed by loud bangs that sounded like gunshots while running down a crowded hallway full of children, parents, and coaches. At that point, there was no protocol, no clear direction, just fear. People sprinted past the halls, some trampled over cheer bags, others dropped to the ground, shielding themselves and crying. A few hid under tables, many just ran, anywhere and everywhere, trying to escape what they thought was a gunman in the building. This wasn't just a handful of people panicking. Entire teams fled mid-routine, families ducked into stairwells, and entire sections of the convention center were in full-blown evacuation mode. Even hotels surrounding the venue descended into chaos, with frightened athletes and parents bursting through lobby doors, breathless, sobbing, still in full uniform. Athletes and parents flooded into the streets, hotel lobbies, and sidewalks. Some were barefoot and most were crying. Many didn't know where their loved ones were. By 1:41 p.m., Dallas police confirmed that they were investigating an incident at the convention center and Omni Hotel. A family reunification area was set up nearby to assist those who had been separated during the chaos. Dozens of children had gone missing, not permanently, but long enough to terrify their families. Parents turned to social media, posting photos and names of their children in hopes that someone might recognize them. Even cheer Twitter, normally a space for stan drama, came together to help. Strangers reshared posts, offered updates, and tried to track kids down. Thankfully, by the end of the day, all children were reunited with their families. But emotional trauma wasn't the only outcome. People were physically injured, trampled in the stampede, shoved to the ground, or crushed against doors. According to Dallas Fire Rescue, at least 10 people were hospitalized with injuries ranging from broken bones to severe bruises and lacerations. One mother reported being pushed to the ground, suffering a broken nose and bleeding cuts while trying to protect her daughter. Personal items were everywhere: shoes, bags, phones, all abandoned in the rush to escape. And while they say that no shots were fired, the injuries, panic, and the fear that spread through the convention center were undeniably real. By 2 p.m., Dallas police found no evidence of any shooter, and by 2:30, they had given the all clear and made an announcement on Twitter or X that there was no active shooter. One athlete said that they saw a varsity representative outside with a megaphone saying that there was no active shooter and that it was just poles falling down, and it was safe to go back inside and retrieve belongings. Media outlets and authorities moved quickly to get the facts out and squelch the active shooter rumors. At 3:41 p.m., the Dallas Police Department posted an update on Twitter or X explaining that a fight between two people led to poles crashing down, which contributed to panic inside the venue. It was emphasized that there was no shooter and no gunman, surely to attempt to remedy the mass panic that had just ensued. While reading this message may have been a sigh of relief for some, for many, it felt like a cover-up. News of the incident made headlines across the country, though often with a markedly downplayed tone that frustrated some survivors of the chaos. Many media reports echoed the official line, describing the event as a misunderstanding sparked by apparent altercation, not an actual attempted attack. For example, ABC News ran the headline, "Fight amongst parents leads to chaos at national cheer competition in Dallas," clearly emphasizing that an argument, not a shooter, caused the scare. Similar coverage on local Dallas stations all underscored that this appeared to be a false alarm, albeit one triggered by real commotion and metal poles clanging to the ground. While this reporting reassured the general public, many in the cheer world bristled at how the story was being framed. To the athletes, parents, and coaches who had lived through those horrifying minutes inside of the convention center, headlines like "Fight causes commotion" or "No shooter, just poles falling" felt almost insultingly inadequate. After all, the panic that erupted was anything but a minor commotion. It was an unforgettable, traumatic ordeal. Entire teams had their routines cut short and sprinted off the mat mid-performance, and families were separated in the chaos, and at least 10 people were injured badly enough to require hospitalization. Much of the mainstream coverage seemed to treat the incident as no big deal, since no actual shooting happened. From the perspective of the attendees, this was a big deal. An event that will haunt them for years. Some pointed out that if such a crowd stampede had happened at, say, a music festival or sporting event, it might have gotten more national attention. But because it occurred at a youth cheerleading competition, the story's broader exposure was limited. After the initial reports over that weekend, the media largely moved on, accepting the official explanation at face value. This relative media quiet in the days immediately following is what some in the community later referred to as a disheartening silence. It was as if, beyond the cheer bubble, nobody was openly acknowledging how traumatic the experience had been for those involved. In contrast to the limited follow-up in mainstream media, many platforms online exploded with first-hand accounts, debates, and yes, conspiracy theories. Almost immediately after the all-clear was given, attendees took to their phones to share what they saw and heard. Videos recorded from inside the convention center surfaced online, showing the moments of panic that swept through the crowd. People screaming, athletes ducking for cover or bolting off stage, and coaches trying to direct kids to exits. These visceral clips, followed by thousands on social media platforms, made one thing clear: the fear in that arena was very real. Many users questioned the official story that falling poles were solely to blame for such mayhem. Adding to the confusion, multiple eyewitnesses claimed that the actual altercation or fight took place nearly a mile away from where most attendees reported hearing the loud bangs and screams. This distance only deepened the skepticism about the whole story. One particularly well-known figure in the cheer world, who is also very well known for being on a TV show called Jersey Shore, Queen of the World, Snooki, was present at the event. She publicly shared on social media that the chaos broke out nowhere near where the fight was said to have happened. She emphasized that the distance between where the supposed fight had happened and the areas where panic erupted simply did not make sense, raising the question: how could poles falling or a scuffle that far away trigger mass panic across multiple halls? Her account echoed what many others described. The sounds people heard, the bangs, the screams, the stampede, felt immediate and local, not like something traveling from a mile away. These testimonies fueled growing suspicion that there was more to the story than authorities were letting on.
Call a gun, run. And I'm like, a gun? And I just see all these moms and cheerleaders running towards me to get out the door over here. So I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And then I don't know if like it's actually happening outside, but then when I get outside, I hear 3 shots go off and everyone just starts running to the highway. So we are outside of seeing like all the comments and everything, and the media is saying that it was from 2 drunk dads like fighting over nachos in the Omni. Poles fell down on the carpet, and that's how everyone said gunshots. No, that's not what happened. And so many people are commenting, it wasn't a shooting. You guys just want to pretend you were in a shooting. You weren't there. I can't stand all these comments of people like just like gaslighting everyone in their experience and like not believing us. Like, we heard gunshots and the Omni. So where this fight happened, I feel like there's 2 things that happened at the same time. As this fight happened with the dads, that was a mile away from where I was in Hall A. So it's all the way, so Hall A is here, and then all the way down here is where the Omni is. But you have to go through a hallway. They were by the bar, and it's carpeted. So if they're fighting and poles fall, you're not going to hear it a mile away. I heard gunshots. No one's going to tell me I didn't hear gunshots. I heard the gunshots. I have it on video. So all these comments of people like commenting saying there was nothing when they weren't even there, like, I just want everyone to know, if you weren't there and you didn't experience it, don't comment on it, because you weren't there. You didn't hear it.
To many, it just didn't add up. People took to social media explaining how that there is no way that that amount of panic would have happened if nothing had gone wrong. And this was echoing dozens of similar sentiments. Some speculated that something more sinister must have happened, and that perhaps the truth was being covered up to avoid bad press. For instance, images and videos of convention center windows marked with small circular holes or cracks in the glass circulated. To the eyes of cheer Twitter detectives, those cracks looked ominously like bullet holes, fueling a theory that gunshots had been fired, and the public was simply not being told. The speculation gained so much traction online that Dallas police eventually addressed it. They clarified that the damaged windows were old, dating back to a 2019 vandalism incident, and not related to the March 1st event. People could not believe that it was parents who had caused the fight, as the trauma that had come from this event does not align with the headlines it was assigned to. What's undeniable is that the sense of betrayal and anger in the community was real. Parents were livid that something like this could happen even at a youth sporting event. Athletes were traumatized by the thought that they could have died, either by a potential shooter or in the mad crush of the crowd. And many accused Varsity Spirit, the company that runs NCA, of failing to communicate properly during the emergency. Aside from the announcements that the building was secure, there was no immediate public statement from Varsity on the scale of what had happened, no apology or detailed explanation in the hours after the evacuation. This perceived lack of transparency is a big reason the word cover-up started trending in cheer circles. People feared that the whole incident would be minimized as a fluke, with no accountability for how poor the emergency was handled on the ground. And with all this, I must point out that NCAA Nationals resumed the very next day. Families filed back into the same convention center and prepared for the now one-day competition for many teams. In speaking to one athlete who competed, he told me that the only security measures he observed were excess signs that read "no firearms" or something to that effect. He expressed feeling confused because really, what were signs going to do? Many teams returned to compete the next day with the exception of some, as some couldn't face the competition following Saturday's trauma. And as Sunday went on, updates about winners and trophies slowly began to fill the NCAA social media feeds, an attempt to restore normalcy. Yet, online, the discussion about the incident itself had not died down. If anything, it grew louder. The cheer community, typically focused on scores and placements, was now engaged in debates about safety protocols and emergency preparedness. Parents and coaches openly questioned, what if this had been a real shooter? Were there any evacuation plans in place at all? It became painfully evident that NCAA/Varsity had no cohesive emergency plan that the average attendee was aware of. And that fact alarmed people as much as anything else. Stung by the criticism and the reality that many of its customers were traumatized, Varsity Spirit finally addressed the situation in a comprehensive way a few days later. On March 5th, 2025, 4 days after the incident, Varsity's president, Bill Seeley, released an open letter to the cheer community, which was posted on the official Varsity website and emailed to coaches and parents. In it, Seeley struck a contrite and concerned tone. The events of March 1st were unsettling for all of us, he began, noting that as a father and grandfather himself, he was incredibly disappointed and frustrated that the actions of 2 adults had such a ripple effect on the entire community. He acknowledged the fear and trauma experienced, and emphasized that Varsity Spirit's top priority was to make sure that families and athletes felt safe at events. Crucially, the letter outlined a series of concrete measures to improve safety going forward. Varsity's open letter, while not explicitly admitting any failure on their part, implicitly recognized that better security and planning might have prevented the scale of what happened. The fact that alcohol policy and bag checks were being revisited spoke volumes. It suggested that yes, intoxicated adults fighting and lax controls were factors that could be addressed to improve safety. Even as the competition wrapped up and Varsity tried to put a positive spin on moving forward, many cheer families were left grappling with trauma and seeking accountability. By the end of that weekend, all missing children had been found and reunited with their parents, and the physically injured were on the mend. But the psychological impact lingered. People have reported still being in therapy to this day. It didn't take long for some of the affected families to decide that simply accepting that it was an accident wasn't enough. They wanted to ensure that such chaos would never happen again, and to hold those in charge responsible. In June 2025, a group of families, eventually representing hundreds of people who were hurt or traumatized, filed a lawsuit against Varsity Spirit and the convention center management. The suit alleges negligence on the part of the organizers, claiming that proper security measures and emergency protocols were not in place, which led to the crowd stampede and injuries. The injuries cited in the lawsuit paint a grim picture. Besides broken bones and sprains, some victims reportedly suffered concussions and even brain bleeds in the crush of people trying to escape. Emotional distress is a major part of the claims as well, with families saying that their children remain anxious and scarred by the event. For its part, Varsity Spirit has not publicly admitted legal liability, but the changes it's implementing and the tone of its communications suggest that it recognizes the seriousness of what occurred. Dallas police, too, have maintained that the response on March 1st was swift and appropriate given the information at hand. Though some parents wish the police or event staff could have gotten on a loudspeaker sooner to direct the crowd more calmly, perhaps an unrealistic expectation in such pandemonium. As of the latest updates, the fight that incited everything was still under investigation, no arrests made months later. It's unclear that they will face any consequences, legal or otherwise, for their actions. In a broader sense, the NCAA 2025 incident has become a wake-up call in the cheerleading world. It highlighted that large-scale events, even ones focused on kids and considered family-friendly, are not immune to the fears of the modern day. The term cover-up continues to float around in some conversations, not necessarily implying that some grand conspiracy was going on, but rather a feeling that the initial response downplayed the gravity of what happened. Many attendees felt that their trauma was quickly swept aside in the rush to resume competition and protect the event's reputation. Even now, months later, there are hundreds of people who insist, wholeheartedly, that what they experienced that day was a shooting, because no one else can tell them what they saw, no one else can tell them what they heard, and no press release, tweet, or public statement can erase the trauma burned into their memories. But here's the thing, even if this really was poles falling down, if there truly was no weapon, no gunman, then we have to ask ourselves an even harder question. What does that say about us, about America? Because if the sound of metal poles crashing to the ground can instantly send thousands of people, children, parents, athletes, into sheer panic, into hiding, sprinting, screaming, and praying, then that says something terrifying about the world we live in. Would the same reaction happen in any other country? Would a cheer competition in, say, Canada or the UK descend into chaos over a loud bang? Or is this uniquely American, this reflexive survival mode response to the possibility of gun violence? In a way, that's what makes the events of March 1st so haunting. Not just what happened or what didn't happen, but why it happened the way that it did. So, to answer the very famous question, what really happened at NCAA 2025? The truth is, we may never know for sure. I wasn't there, and if you weren't either, it's not our place to tell survivors what they did or didn't experience. What we do know is that something triggered a massive wave of fear and chaos, and that fear was real. The trauma was real. And regardless of the official explanation, the people who lived through that moment deserve to be heard, not dismissed. Whether you believe it was a shooting or a cover-up or a tragic misunderstanding, one thing is clear. What took place at NCAA 2025 left real scars on the cheer community, and it's not something that should ever be minimized, dismissed, or forgotten. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching the entirety of this video, even if it was a hard one to get through. I do really appreciate each and every one of you for leaving comments, leaving suggestions, and even just watching the videos and liking it. If you attended NCA, the comment section down below is a safe space for you to share whatever you experienced. I will try to read as many comments as possible to make sure I get a full understanding of what happened. Thank you again, and stay safe.